and I fell backwards really fast, hitting my head on rock. And I instantly died. I instantly had a serious traumatic brain injury with a brain hemorrhage. They say I lacerated my frontal lobes too. Suddenly, I found myself being whisked upwards by a force, by a power greater than myself, very, very rapidly through a dark expanse of space, and found myself in the realm of loving white light. There were two beings of light that I immediately recognized. I went into an experience where I wasn't seeing things. This was more in a state of knowing. And in this state of knowing, pure knowing, I suddenly remembered all my past lives. It was like I'd always known them, that for some reason I'd forgot something I've always known.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
Dr. Yvonne Kason is the president and co-founder of Spiritual Awakenings International. She has had 5 near-death experiences, and we're going to talk about the 5th. Can you please tell us what happened?
Yeah, I had gone that day to Niagara Falls, which I live about a 2-hour drive from Niagara Falls, Canada. And I live in Toronto, Canada. And I was meditating at the bottom of the falls. I like to do that because the roar of the waterfalls to me sounds like the Om vibration, the inner sound of the Om, which you can hear sometimes in deep meditation. And so I would find that if I'd meditate there, I'd go deep very quickly, standing at the base of the waterfall. So that night, and I've done this many times, it's a place I like to go and visit. That night, as I was meditating at the base of the falls, I went really deep. And then I reached a state of communion where the veils disappeared between this side and the other side. And even with my eyes open, I could see the other side. And I saw a being of light appear to me as if coming from the top of the falls. And that being of light was Mahavatar Babaji. And he telepathically said to me, "Welcome home." And meaning home to communion, to God consciousness, to that sense of there was no separation anymore between me and the spiritual realm. I was in that state of oneness, eyes open. And this happened 2 hours before I died. And I stayed in this state. My friend that was with me, we went to the restaurant overlooking the falls and we ate dinner. And the whole time I was in this incredible state of mystical communion. And I said to my friend, I remember, I don't know how long this state will last, but now that I know that I found my way home, I know I'll be able to find my way again. It is possible to find your way to the state of communion. Anyway, a little bit later is when I slipped and fell and died. I mention this because I now think this was my deathbed experience or end of life experience that many people talk about shortly before they die. And you see people where they're talking to spirits on the other side and they're no longer afraid of dying, etc. He had been appearing to me in my meditation and I didn't know who he was. He started appearing to me in my meditation. Somewhere in the 80s, in the middle of the 1980s. Okay. And I didn't know who it was, but I just, in my soul, I knew this had been my guru in a past lifetime. Yes. So after dinner, I slipped on some black ice and I fell backwards really fast, hitting my head on rock. And I instantly died. I instantly had a serious traumatic brain injury with a brain hemorrhage. They say I lacerated my frontal lobes too. How it felt to me was like my head had been chopped into with an axe. That was how severe the pain was. And I heard this horrible mushing sound, like if you were to smash a watermelon on the pavement. That it was a horrible sound. And then poof! Suddenly, I was not in my body anymore. Suddenly, I found myself being whisked upwards by a force, by a power greater than myself, very, very rapidly through a dark expanse of space. I mean, some people might call it a tunnel, but to me, it was just like dark space. And very, very rapidly, I was being lifted up and found myself in the realm of loving white light. Now, I had been in this realm before in my previous near-death experience in 1979. So I knew what it was immediately. And I found myself there at seeming like the entranceway to this loving realm of light. But this time was very different from what happened to me in 79, because this time I was greeted at the doorway, at the entranceway, shall we say. There were two beings of light that I immediately recognized. Great saints from my spiritual tradition, who I love and consider my gurus. They were Paramahansa Yogananda and Mahavatar Babaji. And so lovingly, telepathically, like they were in their light bodies. So immediately I recognized them, like immediately their facial features and even just their energy, their vibration. I mean, how you recognize souls on the other side. As I was entering the light, they were there waiting for me, greeting me, explaining to me, because I am a disciple of that lineage. I know I am. I have been for many incarnations, but my gurus, if you want to say that, were waiting for me as is promised. This is one of the things that Paramahansa Yogananda says, that once you have established a guru-disciple relationship, the guru will be there for you, helping you at your time of transition at death. And I mean, I wasn't thinking that, but it's what happened to me. So I'm like a testimonial that this is really true. I didn't have to look for them or start praying or anything like that. It happened so fast. I was whisked out of my body, and there they were welcoming me and explaining to me so that my soul would understand what had happened. Telepathically communicated to me that I had died, that my work in the body of Dr. Yvonne Kason was finished. And there was a feeling of joy, a feeling of love, and also a feeling of celebration. It actually felt like that in the heavens there, in the light, that there was like a celebration happening, that, oh, she graduated. That was the feeling, like there was being a celebration in my honor. It's a part of my ego personality was still with me as I was entering the light. And, I'd done a lot of research into near-death experiences and heard many stories. And I thought, uh-oh, here it comes. Now I'm going to get my life review. And so I was a little bit worried about how this life review was going to be. And it was interesting because Yogananda and Babaji, they read my thoughts. Like, I didn't say anything. It was just a thought I had. And they glanced over at me, and it was with a glance that worry was gone. Part of the learning experience, you make mistakes. That similarly, the Divine Mother, in its infinite love for all of us as divine children, knows we're going to make mistakes. For a few moments into just experience of incredible joy and love and bliss and communion with the divine in the light. And then it's like I shifted and I went into, I'm going to call it a different state of consciousness, that I went into an experience where I wasn't seeing things. Like in the realm of light, I was clearly seeing visions of the gurus and visions in the light, but this was more in a state of knowing. And that in this state of knowing, pure knowing, I suddenly remembered all my past lives. And it was an unusual experience because it was like I'd always known them, but now I was remembering them again, that for some reason I'd forgot something I've always known. And it was like I had experiences before this death where I had remembered some of my past lives. So I had been aware of some of my past lives before this happened. but it's like having pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that before I had several pieces of who I'd been in some of my past lives. But now with the memory coming back, it was like all the pieces of the puzzle were put together and I could see the whole picture all at once. It was like an aha experience, like, oh, suddenly who I was made sense.
Wow.
In the context of all of my past lives. And it was like, of course, I'm having all kinds of STEs and multiple near-death experiences because I've been having these in many, many incarnations. I remember being alive, my last incarnation, when Yogananda was alive, and that I was one of his students. And I had gotten memories of that when I first traveled to California, when I first went to the Self-Realization Fellowship sites. I was having these bizarre experiences because I kept on jumping through time. I kept on seeing it like it would have been maybe 50 to 100 years ago. And why was my mind doing this? I kept seeing scenes from 50 to 100 years ago. And then I gradually came to understand, oh,
wow.
I was a disciple of Yogananda's last lifetime too. And for whatever reason, I didn't find him again this lifetime till later in my life. But I guess that was the divine plan for my life. But that would be one example. And similarly, when I knew Babaji in past lives, I knew I'd been incarnated with Jesus after a powerful experience in Israel. Everything fit together. That I have been a mystic in many incarnations, and I've even been someone raising awareness about STEs in past lives. So it all made sense to me. This realm of pure thought was also an interesting phenomenon where with time, it was like past, present, and future all seemed to be happening at the same time.
Oh, great.
And it was only a matter of where I would put my attention, whether it would seem to be what we down here consider the past or the present or the future. We experience time linearly, but up there, it's somehow you can see all of it at the same time, although we experience it linearly down here. And it felt to me like I was in that realm and in that state of ecstatic communion, and just able to take in vast amounts of information all at once, for, I call it timeless time, because there's no sense of the amount of time that passed. And but it felt to me much longer than was happening on Earth down here. And that's my interpretation, but that's what I experienced. Anyway, after a period of what I call timeless time, because there was no sense of time on the other side, Mahavatar Babaji and Paramahansa Yogananda and their light bodies reappeared to me.
Oh, wow.
And then they telepathically communicated to me. They said, you may now choose whether to incarnate in the body of a babe to further serve the Divine Mother, and or to return to the maimed body. And that meant the body of Dr. Yvonne Kason. And I was in such a open, ecstatic state of God communion. It was my intellectual mind or ego mind seemed to be asleep, having a siesta. Okay. And it was like my heart or my soul that responded. Like I literally felt the response coming out of my heart area. And the response that came out of my heart area while I was in this ecstatic state was, oh, masters, please guide me. What is the higher choice? I want to do God's will.
Okay.
And they so lovingly, like how a thought can have so much love in it is very difficult to describe, but it did. Exquisitely lovingly, they communicated to me. Both are good. You can choose. Then my heart, again, just said, oh, please guide me. What is the higher choice? And then there was a brief pause, and then, oh, so lovingly, telepathically, it was communicated to be, it will be more difficult, but to go back to the maimed form. And my soul instantly from my heart responded in complete trust and complete surrender. I accept. And it was so fast. It was between the I and the accept that with a gasp of air, I was suddenly back in my physical body again, lying on the ground, breathing my first breath of air into the body. So it was I was fully up there, that accept. And with accept, I was now in the body. But it was like the white light realm and Paramahansa Yogananda and Babaji were there with me. They were still right in front of me. I could, with my eyes open as I was regaining consciousness, I could see both realms completely, like they were superimposed on each other. So the physical realm, that I was reawakening in my body on this 3D physical plane, but the spiritual plane, I was just as open to that. And Babaji and Paramahansa Yogananda were right in front of me. Like they literally ushered my soul back into my body, which to me, I'm moved by the love, that and the care that they were there for me when I died, and they were there for me when I was coming back into my body. They ushered me both ways, and moves me profoundly, that degree of love. Then for the first while, as I was breathing, taking breaths into my body and getting, the life back in my body. I mean, it felt like waking up in an ice cube. It was winter in Canada. My body temperature had dropped after I died. As I was breathing the life back in my body, so I could see both realms perfectly clear. And then slowly, the white light realm started fading from view, sort of like, fading a picture on a screen, until it only became like a little dot. And I mean, that little dot has always been there. And it's been like a life ring for me as I was dealing with all the challenges I had to deal with afterwards. Because what I came back to was a body that was seriously disabled with a traumatic brain injury. I was no longer able to work as a doctor. I was no longer able to do many of the things that I used to be able to do because of the brain injury. I couldn't write anymore, write books. I couldn't public speak anymore. I couldn't teach anymore. I couldn't work as a doctor anymore. I couldn't volunteer in my son's school anymore. Even very simple tasks like taking a shower in the morning were difficult for me, because the areas where I had the injury in my brain affected something called attention and concentration, which meant I was extremely forgetful, even though my intelligence and my long-term memory, they were fine. You have to think of it like a computer where you have different parts of the computer. Like 9 out of 10 parts can be working fine, but if one part really isn't working, screws up the whole system. So that is what happened to me, is that I couldn't remember, for example, taking a shower. Have I soaked that part yet or not? I became disabled from the ability to work as a doctor, for the ability to do the things I used to do. And I lost the ability to use the keyboard on the computer. I had written at that point 5 books on the computer, and I couldn't use the computer anymore. Incredible. And I couldn't tolerate sound. I had to be in complete silence all the time. And severe fatigue. I mean, if you imagine your brain is your most important part of your body, your brain and your heart. And, severe fatigue is very, very common after you've had an injury to your brain. I mean, I was sleeping 12, 14, 16 hours a day, just trying to heal. So all of these things disabled me, even though my intelligence was intact. I also lost my ability to meditate. It was like my life was hit with an atomic bomb. Everything was flattened. At the time, after my brain injury, and after my near-death experience, I had such complete trust in the divine plan, and absolutely knew that the divine plan was loving for everyone, but also loving for me, right? So I knew this was not some punishment or some bad karma, like some people would say, right?
Okay.
That I knew there was some loving purpose behind it. And I didn't know what the purpose was, but I trusted that it was good, that there was a higher purpose and it was good. I mean, many people told me they were very, very moved. Doctors and therapists who looked after me. I went to neurorehabilitation for 7 years. They were, because I wanted to get back to what I did. I loved what I did before. And then when I realized I couldn't get back to being a doctor and writing books and public speaking, at least I wanted to have the best life I could with my disability. And so I pushed and I went to neuro rehab for 7 years. But many of the doctors and therapists told me that it had touched them very deeply to have me as their patient. They were spiritually moved.
Oh, okay.
That they were inspired by my positive attitude, that they were inspired by my faith, that they were inspired by that I wasn't stuck in calling myself a victim. You know, instead of being angry about what I lost, spiritually, I celebrated what I still had. And nothing could take away my love for God. And nothing could take away the fact that I know I am loved by God and we are all loved by God. And in the end, that is far more important than, you know, whether or not I can practice in my office as a medical doctor anymore. But on February 24, 2016, while I was meditating in the Self-Realization Fellowship Retreat in Encinitas, California, the chapel there was built on a spot where Paramahansa Yogananda used to go into some deep states of samadhi. Okay. So it's a power spot, and his vibration is very, very strong there. So I was meditating in the chapel that was built on this very spot. I was there on a meditation retreat for a couple of weeks. And all of a sudden, in the middle of a very, very deep meditation, I inwardly perceived like a fountain of light erupting in the center of my brain. And at the same time as I saw this inner eruption of light, and it made the center part of my brain all become like filled with light. It was as if it had been in darkness for 12 years. And suddenly with this fountain of light, a part of the center of my brain, the lights came on, literally. And I had this feeling of waking up, you know, that some part of my brain that had been asleep for 12 years had now woken up.
Wow.
And I was healed. My brain injury was healed. And suddenly all these ideas, it was like a floodgate open, all these ideas of the things that I should write in my next books. I mean, you know this, you've written many books. I had ideas and these are my ideas, but they were being formulated and flooded through my consciousness as how I would present them in my next, not one, not two, not three, several books, you know, and this inspired creativity awakened that day. And after I finished my meditation, I went to my little room in the retreat and I'm making notes like crazy, all my ideas. And this continued every day. I was getting ideas. And, you know, with time, it's like, as you know, like a sculpture, you're sculpting things. Okay, this will be in this book, and this will be in this book, and this will be in this book. My brain injury was pretty well instantaneous healing. The other injuries, you know, like my energy and attention concentration, some of them also healed instantly. Some of them, it was sort of gradually over the next year. They were very, very rapidly improved. But basically, I'd say 90% of the healing happened virtually instantaneously. To me, the grace of God, it's a miracle. Miracles do happen. And I tell people, never give up. And this is how you can contact me at Spiritual Awakenings. This is our website, Spiritual Awakenings International. This is our website, www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. And please subscribe. We also have a great YouTube channel you can subscribe to, watch our videos. But that is how you reach me.
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.